Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets. Or you can subscribe to the channel and click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. I've got Daniel Killen on with me today. Hi, Daniel. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, so as you say, I'm Daniel Killen. I've just started a channel on YouTube called The Fight Station. We're going to do breakdowns, reactions, previews for everything boxing, MMA. And yep, cheers, Chris. Really appreciate having me on.
No worries. So what we're going to do this week is talk a little bit about the matchroom card, the two main fights on that card, rather. Conor Benn against Samuel Vargas and Shannon Courtney against Ebanie Bridges. I'm going to defer to the expertise of Daniel when it comes to the female fight. I'm not as clued up when it comes to the women's game, but I have noticed something that I believe is quite an interesting sort of psychological analysis of Ebanie Bridges. So we'll discuss that. But first off, we'll talk about Conor Benn and Samuel Vargas. Daniel, do you just want to give your own little view on this, your breakdown, how you think the fight's going to go?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I mean, Conor Benn's a good fighter to watch, isn't he? I don't think this is as much of a step up from the Formell fight as maybe being portrayed by Eddie Hearn and stuff. But Samuel Vargas, he's been in with a lot more top welterweights than Sebastian Formella. It'll be a good sort of litmus test to see how Ben stacks up to, your likes of Virgil Ortiz, Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, Amir Khan. I do see Ben coming through it. I'll be impressed if Ben manages to stop Vargas. I mean, he's only been stopped by elite big punching welterweights, and I don't think Conor Benn's a massive puncher at welterweight. I still think he is quite small at the weight, but I do see him, if he sticks to his boxing. I mean, he's made big improvements under Tony Sims. We've seen his jab was very improved, and if he gets behind that, I can see him having a relatively comfortable night's work. But, if he falls back into old habits, I could see it being a bit of a tricky night for him, a bit of an uncomfortable night, because Vargas is experienced. This will be his 40th fight, and obviously you mentioned the names he's been in with, but I think overall this is as easy as Conor Benn wants to make it.
Interesting. I'll be honest, I actually think this is a much harder fight than Ben's last fight. I think stylistically, there's a lot more that I find interesting with this fight. I think Vargas does a few subtle things, which are quite interesting. He's not an elite level guy, but he tries to implement certain things that I believe he's learned from observing elite level guys. There's certain moves that he tries to copy. I believe he tries to use the Philly shell at times, and he doesn't do it as well as somebody like a James Toney, for instance. But what he does do is he'll have his hands quite close to his body, sort of inwards, and when shots are coming at him, he tends to block them quite often. He's not really a moving type of guy. You'll hit the target somewhere if you're teeing off on him. But what he tries to do is punch with you. And he was able to have a little bit of success against Virgil Ortiz in terms of fighting back. But Ortiz is such a fluid, really good offensive sort of fighter that eventually it took its toll. But what he tended to do was he would try to catch that lead hand, roll, and then come back with something. And because Conor Benn is the sort of guy who, you're right, he's developed a much better jab. I mean, so impressed with that shotgun jab that he's developed.
He just sort of shoots it up from the hip, doesn't it? It's like a David Haye type jab.
And as he jumps into it, he might have a little bit of a wide stance, but he might not be too mobile in exchanges. But in between the exchange, he's actually quite light on his feet as well. Yeah. And he'll get into that position where he shoots it from low, like you're saying, hard to see. But the one area with Conor Benn is sometimes when he's looking for those big hooks, he'll turn past the line. So he'll throw the hook and go past the line. And because Vargas is the sort of guy that will try to roll with shots and come back, I'm wondering if he starts to time Conor. I do think he's a little bit too easy to hit. So I expect, I was almost going to call him Conor McGregor. I expect Conor Benn to come out on top. But I can imagine it being another one of those old school tear-ups. I can imagine him establishing the jab early and then being taken into deeper waters. Is there any way in which you envisage a Samuel Vargas win?
I mean, as you say, Vargas, he gets into that shell and he gets quite low with the sort of Philly shell. He's a decent body puncher, Samuel Vargas. That was where I thought he had most of the success against Virgil Ortiz. I just think Conor Benn, he's not good quick hands in the sense that his combinations aren't blisteringly quick, but the single shots are very sharp, especially the jab. His lead hand in general is very good. So that's why I say that if he does sort of stick to his boxing and use single shots, and he'll be much lighter in the feet than Vargas, in that sense, he can make it an easy night's work. But whether he will is a completely other thing. Conor Benn loves a tear up, and if he does sort of fall back into those habits, and it's hard to see Vargas getting the win, because I don't think he'll knock Conor Benn out, and I don't think he'll get a decision. But I think he could make it a very unpleasant night work if Ben does get dragged into a scrap with him.
Yeah, you see, one thing, I agree with all of that. The only thing that I think is a potential concern for Ben, and don't get me wrong, I believe he wins the fight. He does have a tendency, especially when he turns past that line, to then square up. And I recently did a sort of breakdown video of Israel Madrimov, and I was explaining how when he gets himself out of position, he puts himself in almost in a safe area, even though he does that. With Ben, he doesn't really do that. He stays in that center line. And Vargas is not a big puncher, but he's got enough pop there whereby if Ben walks onto something, it could cause him a problem. We've seen Ben hurt in the past against guys who perhaps weren't as big punchers as Vargas. And although he's come a long way in terms of his general skill set, I don't think this is an easy fight. I think it is a step up. I think he will come through it. But I'm really interested to see if Vargas is going to have success with Ben sort of overcommitting with powerful shots. Yeah. It's an interesting fight, but I agree with you. I fancy Ben to win this fight.
I suppose we've never seen Conor Benn get head flushed by a fully fledged, welterweight either. So
that's the other
whether
thing.
He does have as good a chin as I'm sort of imagining, it could be wrong, couldn't it?
I mean, he has in the sort of face-off that they had, they've yet to do the weigh-in, but in the face-off, he did seem like he's grown into the weight. He did seem like the bigger man than Vargas. So obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean just because you're taller and wider that you're going to carry that weight as effectively, because like you're saying, his experiences with being punched by smaller guys. But he doesn't look like he's going to be overwhelmed physically, at least. At least from the eyeball test. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I agree with you. In terms of the other fight, is there anything else you want to add, by the way, for this?
No, I think we've covered that pretty extensively.
In terms of the other fight, the female fight, the main female fight on the card is Shannon Courtney against Ebanie Bridges. I'm going to defer to your expertise when it comes to this. I don't know too much about the female game, but I do want to add this one thing before I do. There's been a lot said of this being a bit of a gimmick. Now, obviously, Shannon Courtney has a big male following. Ebanie Bridges is a very beautiful woman. And as a result, people are saying, oh, look, it's just, I can't wait to see the weigh-in. And that's what, it's a gimmick. And Shannon Courtney should batter Ebanie Bridges. I don't know them well enough as fighters to have a prediction, a genuine prediction. It would be me blagging, essentially. But there was one thing that I saw. I saw an interview with Ebanie Bridges where she was answering questions. It was sponsored by Betfred. I'm not sure who carried out the interview, but it was a whole bunch of journalists that were asking one question after the other. And she was talking about her future plans. And this might have just been hot air, but she was saying how when she's done from the sport of boxing, she wants to go, she has no interest in MMA, but she wants to go into bare knuckle boxing. And she said there's a lot more money in the women's game, in bare knuckle boxing than there is in professional boxing at this current moment in time. And it got me thinking, if this is a woman who's merely concerned about her beauty, as a lot of people are portraying, are you really going to go into that sort of arena, which is going to leave you with permanent scarring? It's going to leave you with cauliflower ears. It's going to irrevocably change her looks. Yeah. And to me, that suggests, unless she's just talking rubbish, it suggests that she has the mindset of a fighter rather than the mindset of a model. She might look the way she does, and she openly said, look, at the end of the day, you have to use your attributes. And if that's, she openly says that it's the way I look, she likes the way she looks. And she openly says, look, if I look good, I'm going to use that. It's part of building yourself up. And to be fair, let's be honest, there are male fighters that have done the same sort of thing. If they've got a good physique, they'll go and do modeling, they'll do all sorts of things. So it's nothing new. Yeah. But it just made me think, this idea, like I said, I have no idea what she's like as a fighter, but this idea that she's just a gimmick who's only there because she's a bit of a model and she's just looking for a paycheck. If she's honest about that, about going into the bare knuckle scene, to me, it suggests she's got a genuine mindset of a fighter. What's your take on that? And then how do you expect the fight to go?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I don't think Ebanie Bridges is a gimmick at all. I've watched a lot of interviews with her with this last week. You touched on how the bare knuckle boxing would obviously change her appearance. I think she's used her appearance, her Instagram, etc., to land this big fight. But I think Ebanie Bridges is fully focused on a career as a fighter. I don't think she's any interest in that being using the fighting to promote that side of things, if you know what I mean. I think it's more the other way around. She's very sharp. She's a teacher. And I think she has got under Shannon Courtenay's skin a bit as well. I don't think, Shannon Courtenay likes, I mean, she's obviously used to the limelight being on her in these matchroom shows, and I don't know how much this comes into it, but she's probably used to being the better looking woman in the fight too. And I don't think she likes this attention going to Ebanie Bridges. In terms of Bridges' fight style, it's crazy, the contrast and her appearance and her fight style. I mean, she's strong as anything. She used to be a bodybuilder. She's a bit flat-footed, but she come forward and she really seems as if she's got a bit of power as well. I think this will actually be a really good fight with Courtney. Courtney's last fight was one of the more impressive knockouts I've seen in a female fight in a long time. I mean, she absolutely flattened that Polish girl she was fighting. I think it was the 9th round. So I think this actually could be like a surprisingly good fight. And it's a weak fight for a world title fight, even for a women's world title fight. I mean, she's 6-1, Bridges is 5-0. Even Eddie Hearn saying they both are realistically 1 or 2 fights away for a world title. And if Hearn's saying that, then they're probably 4-5, aren't they? But I think this should actually be a bit of a barn burner, to be honest. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Can I ask, because one of the criticisms for the women's game is that there's a real lack of depth. Are you saying it's they're flattered to be fighting in a title fight simply because they haven't had enough fights, or because they're not at that level yet? In other words, you see what I'm saying? Is it just a case of their record needs to be padded up more? Or in other words, do you not believe they're good enough to be fighting for a world title?
Well, it's hard to gauge whether someone's good enough in the women's game because, the divisions are so shallow. I mean, Courtney was in with Rachel Ball, who I think is sort of established now as being a top sort of UK female fighter. She's considered the world level. The winner of this fight would go on to face Rachel Ball. It's the Bridges side of thing as well. Her record is, it's paper thin in terms of the resumes of people she's fought. I think 2 have winning records. But Courtney's, apart from the Rachel Ball fight, isn't that much better. You compare them to the top female world champions, your Katie Taylors, your Terry Harpers, and I think both of these are a way off them. And I think if there was any sort of big unification fights, the winner of this would be found out quite badly.
And the thing is, going back to the aspect of psychology that we were discussing, Shannon Courtenay herself has basically spoken about how she's found self-confidence through boxing, and that she feels that she believes in herself now, and she's got dreams that she wants to achieve. Like I said, I've not seen too much of them. Do you see any discrepancy in the mental strength between the two fighters? Is there something that you think you see in one of them where you think, you know what, this girl's really got that bit between her teeth? Or do you think it's a case of them both wanting it? Because you have mentioned that you feel like she's gotten under Shannon's skin a little bit.
Yeah, I think she has. With regards to Ebanie Bridges, and the footage that is available of her, she's a brawler. I don't think her gameness, her willingness to fight could be called into question at all. As I say, she'll come forward and she'll throw punches, not necessarily always with the best technique, it must be said, and it can look a bit novice and a bit white collar at times. But
is that the way she throws the punches, or you mean her entry point? Is she creative with the way she comes in, or she just walks you down?
Her defense isn't bad. She moves her head. She's got good sort of pivoting with her waist, but once it gets into fire, the technique can go out the window a bit. But she's been able to overwhelm opponents in the past doing that. And saying that, I do think, sorry, who's she fighting again?
Shannon Courtenay.
Shannon Courtenay, apologies. I do think Courtney will be much more refined. Courtney will have a better jab. She might be able to keep her off for the first 3-4 rounds, but the pace that Bridges set could prove to be a lot.
Interesting. So you're backing Bridges then? You think that she'll get her late?
If she is to get her, it'll be late. I think the odds are a bit wide in Shannon Courtenay's favour. I mean, is she 1-10? Something around
I know she's
prices.
the hot favourite. I haven't looked at it.
She's a big favourite. In Courtney's last fight before she got the stoppage, the Polish girl she was fighting, she was able to set a big pace in Courtney, and Courtney dealt with it well. But this Bridges is far bigger. She's far stronger. If she can get in Courtney's chest, I think she could make it quite an unpleasant night.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because going back again to the psychology, when you're talking about Ebanie Bridges, she was a former weightlifter or powerlifter. And with the way she looks and the fact that she's athletic, there are an awful lot of sports that she could have gone into. She could have even gone into sort of action movies. You could imagine her being in some sort of what's that one with Stallone called? The Untouchables? No, what's it called?
It is the Untouchables. It's got all the big ones. It's got Stallone. It's got Van Damme. Yeah.
What's all that called? Is it the Untouchables?
I don't know.
I don't know. Point is, I can imagine her in a movie like that. So the fact that she's chosen a very physical sport, which requires you to punch and be punched in the face. It suggests that there's a naturally aggressive aspect to her. And if she can get inside against Shannon Courtney, who is, I guess, the boxer, as you're saying, it sounds like it'll be a great mesh of styles, the boxer versus the puncher. So hopefully everybody gets to enjoy a good fight. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of your prediction with this?
Yeah, just as you say you think Ebanie Bridges, she's got that sort of bit between the teeth to be a fighter. She's been training combat sports from 5-6 years old. She's had MMA fights. I think she definitely has a fighter's mentality. I don't think like she sees herself as a gimmick at all. And as you say, there's much easier ways that she could make a living, definitely, than getting punched in the face.
Well, that's great. Daniel, thanks very much for coming on. Let me ask you just to give everybody a sort of heads up as to where they could find you, where they could reach you on social media.
Yeah, so just the Fight Station on YouTube, and then at the Fight Station on Twitter. If you want to give us a follow there, that would be fantastic. And
your personal Twitter, because you've also got another.
Yeah, so my personal Twitter is Daniel Killen TFS. If you want to give that a follow as well, but be prepared for verbal diarrhea.
Daniel, thanks a lot. Appreciate having you on, and I hope you enjoy the fights. And good luck.
No problem, Chris. Thanks again for having me on.
No worries.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.